Welcome back to the BDTV Breakfast Show. This is the big story, and this is where we discuss key issues shaping our nation and our economy at large. My name is Elizabeth Musa. Today, we are exploring ways Nigeria can boost its production capacity as the country battles low productivity, especially in agriculture and industry. Productivity is a measure of economic performance that compares the amount of goods and services produced with the amount of inputs used to produce those goods and services. In Nigeria, productivity remains generally low, especially in agriculture and industry, contributing to poverty and underdevelopment. To help us put this important discussion in proper perspective with a view to finding solutions to the challenge, we are joined by Dr. Ayo Teriba. Let's go straight to the conversation, Dr. Teriba. Thank you very much for joining us once again to discuss this important topic.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir.
Let's
start by asking you to help viewers understand what productivity entails and why it's important in an economy, especially like Nigeria.
Oh, well, you already defined what productivity is as the relationship between input and output. So how much output are you able to get per unit of inputs? The higher, the more productive you are. For the country, the trouble is with aggregate productivity, collective productivity. The things that the country permits you to do, or the things that the country inhibits you from doing. For example, the main bottlenecks in the way of productivity growth in Nigeria are very poor energy supply and very poor transport situation. If you can't get energy of any type, be it fuel or power, to ensure that you can produce when you desire to produce, then you have a productivity crisis. We all know the situation with supply of fuel in the country, in spite of we being a major crude producer. We all know the trouble with the supply of power in the country. The national grid collapses ever so often. So this, and we all know the bottlenecks with rail transport. The rail transport system hardly functions, and therefore everybody takes to the road for commuting and for haulage. And we see the gridlocks that creates. We see the accidents, that happen ever so often, tankers exploding and the rest of that. So as long as Nigeria cannot resolve these transportation bottlenecks, particularly ensure that there is a nationwide rail connection, our productivity level will be low. And as long as we can resolve the energy supply and the, whether it's fuel or power, our productivity levels will be low.
Nigeria's productivity, like we know, is generally low when compared to the advanced economies like you've alluded to. Can you give us some insight as to why this is and what some of the key factors driving this could be?
No, well, they deliver on energy supply. We don't. And they deliver transport infrastructure. They deliver well-functioning intermodal transport system. They are not down just to road transport, for commuting and for haulage. Most functioning, most productive societies rely primarily on rail for haulage. They rely primarily on rail for commuting. And road transport does the, small short trips from rail station to the last mile, to the final destinations. in many countries around the world now, including some countries in Africa, it's faster to travel by rail than to fly. Because rail takes off from the city center, it arrives at the city center. This travel time is the same with a plane, but you have to drive out of the city to go to the airport, and you have to drive into the city when you arrive to go to the from the airport to the city center. So rail is far more efficient than road transportation, and for domestic trips than air transportation. But we don't have it. We used to have it in the past, and that's a very sad commentary on Nigeria, that we did better in the past than now. Probably our rail systems started collapsing about 1980, and today we practically have no rails that anybody can plan, for haulage or for commuting. So that's the difference. You don't need to search too far to know why they are productive and we are not productive. As long you have the seventh largest population in the world, just moving them from point A to point B can create a lot of employment, can generate a lot of output, but that fails. Rail doesn't work. And therefore we shortchange ourselves. Power, people need power to be productive. Our national grid is under capacity and it collapses often. So you don't need to search very far.
I like how you've just highlighted some of these things, but let's look at some specifics. The IMF said that Nigeria's GDP in 2024 dropped to $194.96 billion in 2024, and that's from $568.5 billion recorded in 2014. Does this say anything about the level of productivity in the Nigerian economy?
In part, it does, but this takes us to a different level entirely, about the stability, of Nigeria's macroeconomy, because you are now quoting dollar GDP. And the key determinant of whether that's, the collapse that you now report, to below $200 billion from more than $500 billion in the space of 1 decade, speaks to what has happened to the exchange rate in that period. So you are now, raising an issue of macroeconomic instability. It speaks more to instability, to inadequacy of foreign reserves. Because if our exchange rate had been stable, or if our exchange rate had been stronger, we would have moved from the $568 billion in 2014, maybe to $2 trillion by now, maybe to $1 trillion by now. So the key variable there is the exchange rate, more than anything else. We could well be producing more than in 2014 in terms of volume and in Naira terms, but in 2014 would have been something like 150, 160 Naira to the US dollar. Today, it's 1,500 to the US dollar. So if we had not been productive, the GDP should have crashed, to 56 billion. It won't be at 200 billion. So the fact that in spite of that deep collapse in the exchange rate, is just what 10% of what it was worth before. Our GDP is still, just about a third of what it was then, shows you that we probably are productive, but the macroeconomic instability robs us of the gain in dollar terms.
And speaking of productivity, Dr. Ayo, analysts will say that Nigeria does not have a functional educational system. How does, in your own opinion, how does a functional skills-taught education system help to raise productivity in Nigeria?
Well, I cannot comment on you say analysts, unless you unmask who those
Some of those
analysts are,
analysts, yes.
then we'll be able to, unless you tell me who the analyst is, we'll be able to judge their own competence to such assertion. I've listened to people who canvass skill-based education, but the majority of them have no understanding what education itself is. They begin to rubbish university certificates and say that skills are better. But when you look at them, you see that they themselves don't understand what a university education is. Knowledge, at the end of the day, certificates are about knowledge. And it's the knowledge, that drives the world. The inventions, the patents, that leads to trademarks and the rest of that are not skill-based. They are not skill-based. So the patents, the inventions and the trademarks that are driving those companies that now are worth more than $1 trillion on in stock markets, primarily in the US, but also in Taiwan and in Saudi Arabia. It's not about skills. It's about knowledge. It's about intellect. It's about creativity or inventions. And I'm not sure that that's something mechanical about skills. So there's a space for skills, no doubt, but you can never sacrifice knowledge on the altar of skills. I will not subscribe to it. I went to school. I went to some of the best universities in Nigeria and abroad. I was at University of Ibadan. I was a premier university. I got 2 degrees there. I was at Cambridge. I was at Durham. I got certificates. There was nothing about skills. And if you now say contributions to knowledge doesn't amount to productivity, that skills help you to contribute more to productivity than knowledge, I will never agree with it. I will dispute it. So please, name who is saying it, and let's see if the person knows enough about education even to be able to contribute to the conversation. That's my view.
Yeah, Doctor, I like what you said when you said that you cannot sacrifice knowledge on the altar of skills. But let's give more details now. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria has said that 767 manufacturing companies shut down in 2023, with 365 others experiencing distress. Is this in any way contributing to the low level of productivity in the economy?
Well, see, low level of productivity in the economy, I told you, is an aggregate thing. It doesn't matter what you do. There are 46 sectors in the economy, and manufacturing is only about 13 of those 46 sectors. Low productivity affects everyone, more or less equally. So now, if manufacturing association, the problem I have with the figure, it's like you coming to tell me that so many Nigerians died last year. It means nothing to me. It's incomplete information because so many Nigerians were born last year as well. So you can't just come and say 700 and something manufacturers shut down without telling me how many started operation. Human beings are not born to live forever. Companies are not born to exist forever. Some industries will mature and die off, and new industries will come in. So, and the realm in which rapid innovation in the global and the national environment means that many more startups are springing, than companies, maybe. So I am not disputing that manufacturing is affected, but it's affected like, even services or any other. When we are talking of failure in infrastructure or failure in energy or in transportation. Agriculture, for example, suffers perhaps a lot more in terms of post-harvest losses of 60% that the government reports. It's not even farmers that are reporting it. It's government that is reporting post-harvest losses, down to transport bottlenecks, down to a high energy cost and the rest of it. So I sympathize, that the Manufacturers Association may be trying to make a point, but they should make it meaningfully. Tell us how many new companies sprang up in the year, compared how many shut down in the year. And then we can make some meaning and sense out of it. My view.
Right. And speaking of making the point meaningfully, the IMF data shows that Nigeria's per capita income has again slumped to $839 from about $877 last year. What does this fall mean for average Nigerians, and what can the government do to improve this tanking GDP per capita?
Very good. That we are talking now about what government can do. You have already said that GDP has fallen from 560 billion to 194 billion. So you divide that with the population, and you have said in that single statement that per capita income has collapsed as well. From above 2,000 in 2014 to below 1,000 now. What can the government do? As I had told you, there are productivity bottlenecks or supply bottlenecks, but there are also macroeconomic challenges. Nigeria's macroeconomic situation is unstable. Our foreign reserve levels are not adequate. Our exchange rate has been weak and may get weaker if we don't get reserves up to adequate levels, and that is stoking inflation, and putting pressure on central bank to hike interest rates, multiplying the mysteries and the woes, that Nigerians have to face. And in an environment of high devaluation, high inflation, high interest rates, Nigerians have to pay more. For example, for the fuel that they hardly get, pay more for the power that they hardly get, pay more for gas, pay more for this, pay more for that. And you can see now the latest round, telecoms companies are also beginning to adjust because they also face all those shocks, and you can't blame them. So how should we solve the problem? Now, one of the clogs in the wheel of Nigeria's productivity that we worried about 25 years ago that we don't worry about anymore now is telecoms. Telecoms, like power and like transport, was a source of uncompetitiveness for manufacturing and for agriculture and for everybody else in the economy as of the 1990s. But in 2001, we opened the space to investors who have invested in the sector to saturation. You should do the same with power transmission. You should do the same with rail transport. Open the space to investors and let them come and replicate what they have done in the GSM telephony. Let them come and replicate it in transportation and in energy. I see no other way forward. If government tries to continue to hold on to it, as they have in the 25 years since they liberalized the telecoms, we will continue to get the same results. So why is this important? Because opening the space to investors will also bring in foreign direct investment that can boost our reserves and lead to macroeconomic stability. So you can solve the two problems with a single stone. That as investment arises, it shores up foreign reserves, stabilizes exchange rate, and enables inflation to come down. And then it also fills infrastructure gaps in power, in transport, particularly rail transport. So this, very simply, is what I would recommend. We've said it to government, since we returned to democracy. We've said it to the military before then. Well, somehow we stumbled on the telecoms liberalization, and government has turned a deaf ear to letting investors coming into power transmission and coming into rail. Until government listens, I don't see a way forward for the country.
Dr. Ayo, speaking of a way forward, I have a two-pronged question for you, and I'm just going to come this way. So the Naira's rally is giving businesses and households renewed optimism, obviously. Now, reforms of the CBN are yielding results. Many people are saying beyond the reforms that the CBN's intervention in the market is really what's doing the magic. Do you share this sentiment? And also, do you think that this kind of intervention is sustainable, given that our reserves are already on a decline? Also, what's your general perception of the exchange rate market so far?
Okay, I do think that we should be frank with ourselves. This time last year was when the Monetary Policy Committee of the First Bank of the Central Bank held their first meeting under the current regime, after being reconstituted under the current regime. And yeah, the exchange rate has weakened as far as 1,900, and it has improved. I thought the best record that we saw was at end of April last year, when it was at 1,300 or something. So it has gone to 1,650, is now going back to 1,500. But compared with 1,300 in April last year, which was, what you could say, after the scare of 1,900, that looks encouraging. Now, having 1,500 in the first, 3 months of the year, following the lull that tends to happen in January and maybe February, before activities begin to pick up. Most people would have imported more than was required for December, and things may be weak in this first quarter of the year. So they have to be patient and wait and see if this improvement we are seeing in the exchange rate, given that March, April last year was the best record for the exchange rate. So don't be too quick, to express optimism and, commend efforts. Inflation is still at record levels. Let's hope that exchange rate weakens sufficiently on a sustained basis to bring inflation down. And I would be on the side of encouraging the central bank to do more, than commending them, for until maybe when we get to some more meaningful level for the exchange rate. I don't think 1.5 is something to celebrate, given that we were coming from about, less than 500 to the US dollars. And what the exchange rate is goes a long way to determine where our dollar GDP value is, where our per capita income. I thought that the government should be pushing more aggressively to see the exchange rate go back to below 1,000 to the dollar, and not be congratulating ourselves for 1,500 to the dollar. That's my view. That's why I was asking you.
What magic?
What results are you talking about?
I completely understand. I understand that, sir.
Uh-huh.
So basically, we shouldn't be too quick to, congratulate or be overly excited. I think some people are just always looking to see the positives, even if it's just a little bit here and there. But thank you very much, Dr. Ayo, for your time with us this morning. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you for shedding more light and for being very frank about it.
Thank you very much.
Have a lovely day ahead.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And that's how we bring it to a wrap this morning on the Big Story segment. Do stay tuned as we bring you more updates.